So first of all, Mark, you say that construction as manufacturing. It's a word to say, and you talked a lot about different technical issues of 3D volumetric elements, but the difficult question behind it is how to arrange a business model, how to conceive, how to make a business model that actually supports that and makes money out of it as well. So who in this value chain do you think has the greatest opportunity for taking on that new type of business model?
So I think there's a couple of things happening at the moment. If I look at the UK market, we've got this new disruptive type approach which Legal & General and the Berkeley homes of this world are already adopting, which is complete vertical integration, which is quite unusual. We come from a market which is fragmented, where no one wants to employ people, no one wants to have fixed overheads, they want to be very flexible. And what L&G and Berkeley have done is say, look, if we have going to have a sustainable business on a 10-year play, we have to get back in control of the whole process. And they have made a decision to bring all of that in-house, to vertically integrate the manufacturing. And they buy the sites. So they're the developer, they're buying the sites, they're going through planning, they're using their own DFMA product platform, they're building it, and they're either selling it or retaining it. Now, that I don't think is going to be the primary agent of change in the UK, because actually the industry is so fragmented that you can't expect £130 billion sterling industry to all of a sudden go that way, because it won't. What I'm starting to see is the negative stimulus for change that I described in terms of labour issues, forcing tier one contractors to have to reevaluate how they deliver on site. So even in the last 2 months, there's been a series of announcements by at least 3 top 5 contractors in the UK that they're making commitments to reduce the amount of site labour they're going to use on their sites by using prefabrication. Now, what they're doing is they're not vertically integrating. They're going to align with a supply chain that actually is using prefabricated components. They're going to act more as an integrator, where they can bring site-based construction management alongside manufacturing and logistics expertise, and wrap that as a simulated vertically integrated model.
Yeah, like construction management type
sort of, but it's a more professionalised version of that, and it's more reliant on high-level manufactured content. And I think, what you're not going to have. There's a few exceptions. So Lang O'Rourke is a very well-known business in the UK that is vertically integrated. So they have their own factory, they have their own engineering services team. They've lost money for the last few years because that, as an investment, the market wasn't ready for it. The market is now recognising it has to deliver differently. So I think the changing dynamics I spoke about at the beginning of my presentation are going to force new organisational models and business models that are either vertically integrated or simulated vertically integrated models.
So actually what you're saying here is that you don't have to have a very large manufacturing facility to do this.
No. And I think also the other thing that technology is going to enable is distributed manufacturing. So rather than having one big factory in massive industrialised production capacity, you'll see some of the ability to provide to use digital tools to do on-site manufacturing, flying factories, small-scale setups that actually are completely accessible to SMEs, fully distributed.
So it's not a matter of company size either.
No.
So one of the other key topics that you spoke warmly about was the use of digitalization, if you say. You talk of AI and you had a very interesting picture that they really thought pinpointed one of the problems. That was how the digital thread diminishes from design to construction. What can we do about it?
So one of the reasons my report speaks so much about what I call pre-manufacturing, but it's prefab effectively, is that I believe prefab is the bridge that takes digital design closer to digital end products. So the more you can prefabricate using digital manufacturing, that's the important thing. And we're not talking necessarily about building analog in a shed. We're talking about
please explain to us what digital manufacturing is.
So that is CAD/CAM, computer-aided design to computer-aided manufacturing. So using machinery in factories that are digitally controlled through code, CNC machines and the like, so that the accuracy of the components that are being delivered is driven from the digital design. The more you can use digitally manufactured components and you can consolidate them, the less you're reliant on ad hoc site labour working in poor conditions with the variabilities of site that we all know about, the greater the digital thread is retained into the completion of the asset.
But if it's going to be, you know, a fully integrated digital trace, you also have to load your physical components with digital, you know, what do you say? You have to be loaded with digital help as well. So if it's reduced to only assembly on site, you still have to have manual labor somewhere at the end.
And that's why I mentioned augmented reality as being so important, because the manual labour variability of dimensional installation, of ensuring that everything's commissioned correctly, I think AR is the element that can retain the digital thread through the human interaction on site beyond the digitally prefabricated components.
Yeah, and I can also see another benefit of it, I guess, that it will make our industry much more interesting for youngsters to come to. Yeah. I have an experience where I live in the northern part of Sweden, where there's a lot of mining going on. Nowadays they don't do manual labor in the mines. They're sitting in the offices and control the machines down 2,000 meters below the ground. Yeah. So I guess it's the same way we have to go.
Yeah, I think there's an element of robotics on construction sites is an interesting. I didn't mention that, but we're starting to see the beginnings of on-site robotics replacing manual operations. You might have heard of the joint venture between Komatsu and Fieldwire, which is about autonomous earth-moving vehicles being used in the US and in Japan at the moment. We're going to move in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Maybe my last question for now to you is about policy making. We are talking about the city of London is bigger than the whole of Sweden. So that was kind of impressive that you have enforced that kind of movement. So what is your recommendation now to Sweden, for instance? To the city of Sweden. City of Sweden. To achieve the same thing. The policy making influence is rather strong, according to you. What is your recommendation to us?
Well, my understanding is Sweden is fairly well progressed in certain elements of policy making anyway that's influencing construction. So you have some very clear direction in terms of using sustainable materials. Timber is obviously one of the most important materials in construction here, and that is, I believe, already enforced through the planning process or certain technical codes in terms of how you use certain materials. So what London's trying to do is just make sure that policy is driving the industry in a way that it can help modernise itself. It doesn't. London is not looking at materials. It's not saying building timber or building concrete or building steel. It's just saying increase your pre-manufactured value. And PMV, which is the term I use, is agnostic to what material it is or how you actually do it. You can attack it two ways. You can do more in a factory, or you can just use lean construction principles to reduce what you do on site, or you can do both. And London's saying, just increase your PMV. We're going to help by putting new courses on in the colleges that will train people to deliver differently, think more about manufacture type, hybrid skills, and actually we're going to be a client when it comes to London councils to buy some of that products for our affordable housing programme that's delivered differently as well.
And PMV, what was that again?
PMV is pre-manufactured value.
I guess you have a very clear definition about it.
Yeah.
Now the professor comes in.
There you go. So it's a percentage value, and it's the percentage of a construction project that's prefabricated.
Yeah, that was a kind of a very clear message to use that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Going from this discussion of policy making, I'm interested in your viewpoint as a policymaker. What is off-site construction to you?
It's very interesting to hear from Mike here about the experiences from London, and I think that other cities like Stockholm will catch up. We're not there yet. Like the congestion charges, you introduced them a couple of years before Stockholm did it. Stockholm, as many cities around the world and in Europe, it's growing very fast. I think Stockholm is one of the fastest growing cities in Europe right now. And we have a goal here to build 140,000 new apartments and all the auxiliary buildings like schools, libraries, etc. To 2030. And on the political level, policy level, it is a consensus between the current political majority, and the opposition to build a sustainable city. So regardless what happens on Sunday when we have the elections here, we will have very high standards in Stockholm, sustainability standards like a very good indoor climate, no hazardous chemicals, low energy consumption, low carbon footprint in the buildings, adapted to new climate and the challenges there. And all this to affordable prices. And of course, we have a very hot market here in Stockholm, and not only in the city of Stockholm, in the region, I say, and maybe in the whole Sweden. Lack of blue collars, construction workers, skilled engineers, architects. So the challenge here now is to cut the costs for building this sustainable city.
So would that be if you specifically think about off-site manufacturing, off-site thinking, industrialization?
Yes.
What are your requirements on them to help you achieving this?
Well, it will be the question about the costs here. In the procurements in the future to lower the cost, and we can see what the market can deliver, and I guess that off-site construction can actually reduce the costs.
At scale. It's all about scale.
Yes.
If you combine scale, then you drive costs down.
Yeah.
So cost efficiency.
Cost efficiency
is important, yes, as always.
It's very important,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah. So Ulla, from your perspective as an architect, I think you meet these policymakers quite often.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So what do you think about in terms of off-site now? So how do you what would you say to Jonas about?
I mean, the biggest challenge for the moment, I think, is to build sustainable. And I'm very happy to announce in May we have this architecture policy in Sweden, and it's very close to Agenda 2030 and also the UN global goals. So how will you work with that for the city of Stockholm?
Is this work? No.
Yes.
Oh, yes, it is. I think the most important here is to build the sustainable city to the Stockholmers, according to the Agenda 2030. And we have to build, I'm convinced that the industry will fix this for the energy standards and all that, but we have all these soft questions also. When we are planning the city, where you have a very important role here, to have this environment around the buildings and the architectural environment as well, that really gives well-being to the citizens here. And one very important thing here for the architects and in the planning and design is the adaptation now to change climate. For example, if we can use ecosystems in a much bigger way, you just use trees for shadows to reduce the energy demand and use that as an ecosystem and giving a healthier environment for the citizens as well.
So what I'm hearing is a wish maybe for a closer integration of how you address problems, and that really adheres to one of your key messages. So it's an integrated supply chain that is the disruptive model that we are after. So that was interesting. Going to you, Svante, as a contractor, you sort of rule. You're the ruler of the game. You're king. You're king in.
Yeah, I heard that this morning.
Yeah, he's in
You
the
don't.
center.
Oh, you don't always feel like you're top on the value chain, but
I said that you were the CEO, so you're the center here. But you're often the key player. And you have this large experience from all around the world of mega projects that you have done. But to you, as a contractor, what is offsite to you?
I think what we heard here just now was a sort of dilemma that we have. We have, or maybe a possibility. It depends on how you look upon it. But you have the exceeding change for sustainability to build in another way, and you have also the demand on being cost efficient all the time, to produce to lower cost, create more value, so you are able to reach all the customers that are in need of a new house or a new residential. And I think the report here that Mark showed was, in a way, there was nothing new, but in a way I got very scared when I heard it. Because it pinpoint the problems that I've seen in the sector or in the industry for so many years. And it's low productivity, it's a shortage of labor, and it's going to get even more shortage of labor and skilled labor. Because what we've seen during a couple of years that we have exchanged part of our labor from a skilled, educated labor to a low-cost labor that is coming in. So something has to be done, and I think to get the production chains in more control, then off-site production is a very good alternative. Because what we are talking about is to being able to get standardization, repetition, get a controlled environment to do things. And if you can then break out part of what you are doing in a off-site construction, I think that is really a way forward.
Well, one of the also things that I bounced upon was the major, things that happened to large companies. Just the recent years, they got bankrupt. And one of the things that you said, Mark, was the inability to take on risk. One of the things that a contractor is known for is that you're capable of taking risks. You're capable of doing businesses of taking on risks on other. But now that possibility is
yeah, and I think that's what's make the contracting business so special, that you have to handle risks throughout the chain. But I think what we have to do is to be even better how we share risk and how we transfer risk between us. Because if we are collaborating, if we are designing together, we could also get void of a lot of risks during the value chain. So I think that is one of the summaries in your report, that we have to collaborate much more to distribute and get in control of the risks better.
So that is a nice entry for you. So he's here offering risk sharing and collaboration from the contractor point of view. So how would you, as a building materials provider, go on with that?
Well, I think the more upstream we work on any project, whether it's with the investor, with the contractor, the better we can optimize the different parts of the value chain. And in the past, we were in silos, we were with a lot of intermediation, as you presented, and the more we can integrate that upstream with the architect, the better it will be in terms of designing, in terms of standardizing, all that. Maybe one question I have for Svante is, we talk a lot about new construction, and I think the direction is clear in terms of the road is big, but the direction is clear. One big challenge that we face in a lot of markets is on renovation. Those off-site manufacturing apply also for renovation in terms of improving the thermal efficiency, improving towards better buildings, because that's in some markets, 50-60% of the construction market is still renovating old public buildings, housing, and I'm wondering how as a contractor, you would approach a big renovation site with off-site manufacturing, and how?
I think when you're working with renovation, it's very important to work in extremely close relationship with your customer, because you need to make the right efforts on the real estate, but you also need to take care of the ones living in the real estates when you renovate it. And if you plan, and also in renovation, is it some area where it's really hard to get skilled labor? Is it renovation? So I think if you can do off-site production there, we had been testing by making bathrooms, we have been testing by making kitchens, by making separate eating components that you can really shorten the time at site. So I think there's a lot of need of clever solution when it comes to renovation, both to keep down the costs, but also to be able to shorten the time when you're on site. And I think also here you can have a lot of help with the digital tools that are coming today, because you can scan, you can get a really good view of what you are going to do. You can transform that into your models and actually work further with it.
Mark, you've been silent for a couple of minutes now. So I guess a lot of your work internationally has been together with contractor companies. So now when you have Svante here, have you something that you would like to ask him on? That most of you are reflecting back on your discussion, of course, but do you have something here to ask?
So one of the big debates in the UK, in the contracting world, has been the whole issue of how businesses are measured in terms of their financial performance. So we've had historically a market where the large tier one contractors are seen as successful by how big they are on turnover, how many billions of pounds sterling they turn over as a business. And there's now an interesting debate going on, as I referenced in one of my slides, as to whether it should be more about margin and profit. And we're beginning to see signs that some of the largest contractors, so Balfour Beatty is the biggest UK contractor, £6 billion sterling, very clear messages from the CEO there that he will consider shrinking his business and being more selective on what they bid for, what risks they take on to go after increased margin. Do you see that happening here in Sweden as well?
Yes, I think you see it, and I think it's nothing so easy as growing a contracting business. But it's nothing so hard as getting a good profit out of a contracting business. And what you see is that companies that are specialized and that are very clear on their business logic. You have a part of companies that deliver in the residential field, that have a system standard for how they build their houses. They are quite profitable. You have also, when it comes to the civil engineering side, specialized companies that can work over a larger market with their specialization. I think you see a trend that they are more profitable.
Do you see any problem with NCC as a rather big company? Do you see any problems in terms of company size here, that you have a lot of different active business models in the same company?
Yes, you actually see a problem with that. We changed the organization 3 years ago. We had a fairly large country organization. We were building everything in our regions. We broke that up and we specialized in housing business, building business, infrastructure business, and we did that on a Nordic base. It's not easy even if you do that, because you have to transfer it between the countries, and you have a lot of local rules, local norms, local culture and behavior, you know it, in your global company. But I think still a meeting like you do today here is a perfect way of sharing experience.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, I think, and something that you can you can take with you, because this transformation of construction that we are talking about, I mean, you have these disruptive companies like Catera, or if Tesla goes construction, and then you have a disruptive company. But I think that the change for most of you will be within the ongoing business. So you face that challenge of a new way of doing it, and you have the old way of doing it. And there's a problem of cannibalization between those two, of resources, for instance. So I guess that's an important thing to consider, how you really design that company in the sense of taking up the new way of doing it and still preserving the old way. It has to be bread and butter still to support that.
Just one short thing, I think it goes for Saint-Gobain also. In NCC we said if NCC only know what NCC knows, it means that you have so much knowledge within your company, so if you just can connect that knowledge, you can create a lot.
Thank you. Actually, that was my message to you guys. So I just used NCC as the target here. So actually, I was thinking that you should reflect on the same thing. So switching a bit to the architectural view of site.
Yes.
So what the architect has a very interesting role here as the designer on the one hand, the artist, the unique. The design that is needed, and on the other hand, you could be co-producers with most of the components in the value chain with your expertise. So you have an interesting position actually. So for you, Ulla, what is offsite to an architect?
Yes, as architects in Sweden, we have worked with off-site construction for a long time. I think since the 1960, when we worked with the Million Homes program. We already then started out to work very close to the industry. So we are really used to work with the standards from the beginning, planning, and also to cooperate for in the manufacture part. So of course nowadays with digital tools, I think it's more the way going forward. And to meet, I can talk about one project that we're working on, is Skellefteå Culture House. We don't work with Lindbäcks, but with Martinsons that have their production in Skellefteå.
Timber-based.
Yeah, that's a timber-based industry. So there will be local material, but also local industry. And we work really high with the digital tools. And we have this BIM model, and we have no paper drawings at all. So it will be built on site from the BIM model, so to say. So I think it's a really good way to work together in the industry together with the architects. Then I will say what difference is the design process working with the off-site industry, because then you have to decide the design in a very early stage. The core of the building you have to design and complete. So it's another way to work as an architect.
So what do you need? What do you need as an architect to be that co-producer? As it's not in most cases the white paper architecture is no longer. Right?
No.
So it's about standardized. It's about mass production. Still needs a lot of design that has to go into it in every stage. But you lock on the design much earlier on, and you keep to that design. Yeah. As a car manufacturer, you have new models coming out each 5th year or something like that. So how do you see yourself as an architect in that new surrounding?
One important thing is the knowledge of the end users. Will and what they would look for to build this interesting or valuable society, I think. So the end user you have to listen to, and you have to understand what their needs are in a better way to work in this early phase.
how about the business model of an architect? I'm pushing you a bit. I mean, please say to me. Please say to me, no, don't go that. But I will still go that way. I mean, it's a rather strange business model, getting paid by the hour.
It is.
Yeah. So, thank you.
But we work with new business models, I will say.
Yeah, it will work. So
yeah, exactly.
have you got any plans for kind of a new business model in that way? So how do you promote value if your position is a bit changed in that perspective?
I think we can see the value in urban design in the very early stages to plan a new city or a city development. We can say what the value is for this place or for this client or for this. So, and in that way, I think we can work also with other way of...
Like a value translate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. So, Svante, you have a lot of experience also working with architects.
Yeah, indeed.
And working together.
Working together, exactly.
Great.
Sometimes we're working together.
Yeah.
No, of course. I mean, it's very important to have a good collaboration and work together. But if you're thinking of this, getting the cost down, getting the off-site production working, how do you see it? What could you do even more from the architect side to enable that in a larger extent?
Yes, I know that's a big question, because also what you said, Jonas, about building all these new homes in Sweden and in Stockholm, so that is a big question, of course. But I also see I'm a bit scared or afraid of that, because I think off-site manufacture, off-site industry has to increase quality. That is the most important, to the quality
in
the building parts or the buildings as a whole, to work sustainable for a long time. In another perspective, yes.
I mean, it's important when you as an architect say quality, you could mean a little bit different as could when a producer says quality.
Yes. Could be.
So the basic solution for that, as in any marriage, is to keep on talking, right? In all this, we have to have products that we have to work with. So Saint-Gobain is arranging this, and I guess that you have a very intense plan for how Saint-Gobain could be a good player in this. You also have a very important role, of course, thinking of the costs of material and quality of material, and so what is off-site to a materials producer?
You know, it's a big, fascinating journey, because clearly it's a complete re-engineering of our industry, which is well overdue and needed. To some extent, we were in a push strategy, trying to invent products, to push them through distribution channels, and finally to convince the small craftsmen to take those products. Now we are in a pull strategy, where in a pull market we can listen to the end customer, to the architect, to the contractor, and take all those requirements to define and develop new products. And that makes a complete change, because then you know exactly what is the need of the end customer and all the value chain. And then we can build partnership. It was very hard for us to partner with 300,000 small craftsmen in France. But now we can partner and listen to big contractors, big architects, and define our own products. And therefore, you can work on the cost, you can work on the quality, you can work on digital, we can promote our innovation, our building science knowledge. We have the customer experience at the end. We give guarantee to our products. So I think this question of being in a pool market, like other parts of Saint-Gobain, servicing automotive, aerospace. So we have been partnering with the OEM in automotive for years and years. Now we enter into this world for construction. So it's part of our DNA to some extent. And this question of partnership, I think, is very important for us in off-site. And I think it's a good example of all the commitment of those participants to partner with their top customers on this growing change of the industry.
So you have in your mindset now, you have a plan for this. I'm turning back to the business model. You have to have a very clear eye on your business model. Of course, you want to build things that is good for society. Everybody want to do that. But still, you have to earn money. to make a profitable company. That is, of course, the key thing to do that. And one of the things that I hear that you're saying, that your plans are to integrate further on into the value chain, to co-partner with a lot of in a lot of companies that were formerly your customers. Now they are your partners instead. So that is an interesting journey. And your company is equipped for doing this?
We are changing. We have to change also. And one example, even within Saint-Gobain, we discussed about the segmentation of the value chain, but also within Saint-Gobain, we were fragmented. We were a bit in silos. Each product has its own solution. And now we are partnering together to have not only the products and all the innovation we can drive and the comfort solution on acoustic, on thermal, and all the sustainability. We help our customers delivering their green building targets, but we are also partnering together with solutions, from glass windows to ceilings to flooring to partitions. We are also partnering with our distribution business in terms of service, because we can service, we can think about not only the products, but the solutions of different products together, pre-assembled elements, and how we deliver that in terms of logistic on site. And also one important part, we have some R&D people in the room, is to push more and more towards our building science. In the past, we were concerned about the product performance on the packaging of the product. Then it was done, our job was over. We didn't care much about how it was installed, and we didn't care much about the performance of the product in the lifetime of the building. I'm sure and convinced that now our customers are asking first how well it is installed, and if it's off-site manufacturing, it will be, I think, better, with a better cost, better quality, but also during the lifetime of the product, do we guarantee the performance in terms of thermal efficiency? Do we check it? Do we monitor it? And we have also to invent in our products the way to change Internet of Things. Are we going to put sensors in a facade to discover humidity before it's too late? So it's a change also for Saint-Gobain in terms of partnering, in terms of working together, not only in silos, and moving ahead with new tools like internet and sensors in our products and solutions.
So it's very interesting. I will not press you on what you said about lifetime guarantee of the products, but it's reassuring to hear that you say that, because nowadays it's only like the 2-year warranty that you have, and then the product, the house is handed over to the owner and with no responsibilities to it. So how does that sound for you as the representative for Stockholm, that somebody is guaranteeing the lifetime service of the houses that they are building?
From some experiences, it sounds lovely, I'd say. I was thinking about the policy making in the city, and Stockholm, all cities in Sweden, they have the possibility to set the policies on the land they own, not on private land. And Stockholm owns about 70% of the land within the municipality, which make it a very strong policy maker. And as a strong policy maker, of course, you have to work in a dialogue with the builders, with the architects, and we are now building a new city district called the Royal Seaport. And this new city district, you can say it's a test bed, where we have a very close dialogue with all partners here around sustainability targets and standards. And today we have come down to energy standards that are about 30% lower than the national standards. And from the experiences and dialogue in the Royal Seaport, we can now apply that on all city-owned land when we build there. And in 2021, the national standards will come and be quite close to the Stockholm standards. But if we build these very energy-efficient houses, I don't think we can go any further. Maybe you can help us a little bit to reasonable costs. But if you look at a 50-year perspective, the carbon footprint from heating these houses, they are about the same as the carbon footprint from the embedded carbon in the building material and the energy used in the construction site. So that is something that we now see that we have to work more with. And today we have the test site here, the testbed Royal Seaport, where the builders now report to the city the carbon footprint. And that is something that in the near future will be mandatory for all buildings in Sweden, like the energy performance certificates. And there will be a law probably with carbon performance certificates. And here I think it's both a challenge but also a great opportunity for off-site construction to look into these materials with the lower carbon impact, but also I guess on site to have more energy efficient construction sites with off-site production.
Jonas, if I interpret what you're saying is that all the requirements that are put on you, the city of Stockholm or the city of Sweden, the city of Sweden. That was a nice thing with the city of Sweden. But all the things that are put on you as legislative or requirements from politicians, aren't they worthwhile discussing with Saint-Gobain in the early phase so you get the things that you want? I mean, the discussion, when you try out different things, and now you talk about test beds. That's a wonderful idea of testing things under a controlled, umbrella. So I hear again that communication in the very early phases, because he's promising, a guarantee for this building for 100 years.
Yes, great to hear.
So he need to be communicating with you because you know the demands that are coming in the future.
Yes. And we have that dialogue constantly with the builders in the test bed. So Saint-Gobain, you're most welcome to be a partner there.
And what is very important for us, and we have this dialogue with a lot of policymakers, because to some extent, and we continue working on new solutions, but we already have a lot of solutions in terms of passive house. And in the last decades, the policymakers were working on tax incentives. For us, it is better when they work on standards. This is the expectation in terms of cost, in terms of quality, in terms of CO2 footprint, because then it defines standards and the industry can leverage the scale of the new standards rather than rely on tax incentives to motivate people. So we have been working on hundreds of EPDs, environmental product declaration, for the products. We have a website, if I'm correct, in Sweden to help our contractors deliver the targets on their green building label. And we have a lot of engineers in our sales teams to help in this dialogue. So it's, again, back to the question of partnership along all the value chain on how we can meet the expectations. And the more standards we have, the better it is to industrialize all the value chain up to us, of course, on the product side.
So Mark, do you again, turning to your vast international experience, how does this sound to you now, the things that have been going on?
One of the interesting things that you just covered there in that discussion is the nature of a changing business model where the guarantees of how an asset performs comes earlier into the discussion. And one of the debates that's being had in the UK, and it's looking at the aerospace industry actually as a reference point for how, for instance, Rolls-Royce doesn't sell aero engines, it sells hours in the air. And it's a service level agreement, it's a guarantee around maintenance and the ongoing support that's given to the equipment that's installed in an aeroplane. And you can see buildings moving in that direction. That will only happen though through industrialized production techniques, because the risk of building failure traditionally is so great that you can't give those guarantees. So as soon as you move to manufactured technologies and digital, the digital thread being continued, with precision being employed, high quality delivery, then all of a sudden there is a chance of a new business model emerging. It's a very different financial model because it involves revenue rather than capital receipt, so it's a very different thing about your balance sheet. But you're in a very different environment as to how things can evolve. and how you can monetize things differently, have that up value stream discussion very early on. So as a product supplier and as an integrator as well, actually, you can be having a discussion with a building owner. It only really works with people that retain the asset, not speculative trader developers. It has to be someone that's retaining the asset. And but it's very exciting in terms of how that might transform. So there's a big journey to go on, but there's a lot more diverse opportunities for how things can be transacted, monetized, etc. in the future.
So thank you. So I hope that you have have had a pleasure of this discussion. Now I'm trying to think of how we should proceed. You have asked the questions. You have, I guess that some of you have, and as I've heard that these questions will appear on the screen. Apart from prefab, how can the construction sector become more industrialized? So I don't know. I think that Mark may be the first one to take on that question, because you had this, prefab means something in the UK and prefab means something elsewhere. But would you like to reflect on that one?
Yeah. So whether you use the term industrialized or manufactured, I think they're pretty much the same thing. And the one thing I take from looking at manufacturing sectors, whether it's automotive or aerospace, the big difference between those sectors and construction is process. And the absence of structured processes in construction is what sets us apart. I talked about bespoke design, reinventing everything every time, being very site labour dependent, so we can't control things in a factory environment. My sense is that you don't have to necessarily prefabricate to gain some of the advantages of increased productivity through applying a process. And one of the things we're looking at in the UK at the moment in house building is in the warranty market, the guarantee market for houses. Many of the warranty providers are recognising that them putting there and reinsuring those warranties as well, the risk of failure in a building, even if it's traditionally built on site with bricklayers and carpenters in the normal way, if you inject a process into signing things off and inject gateways in terms of what you see in other manufacturing sectors, then you can improve the result. You could obviously, from a personal perspective, prefabrication is what really drives it, but you don't have to prefabricate. You can build it traditionally, but add the process. And that's the bit we're sadly lacking, I think, in too much of our industry. And many contractors and house builders will have their own processes, but it's about how do you apply and ensure they're regulated on site, every single site, every hour of the day. It's really difficult.
So my perspective on this as a researcher is that the thing that we found out with primarily the Swedish companies that have been working with industrialization is actually they have what we can call 4 platforms. Please don't let me explain the definition of a platform. We can take it on the coffee break. But if we just conceive a platform as a collective means for gathering the knowledge that you have, the companies that are working with 4 platforms, one of them is what we call the technical platform. Prefab is included in that. It's just the technical solutions that are included in how you manufacture them and how you can see them. The most important platform is the process platform. So you actually design how you do the processes. You make them same processes every time. So you have to have a process development as well as a product development. So you have to have process development. And these guys that are doing the best job, they have really accurate process development, following up on processes. So that's where the money is lost, and that's where you can earn the money. The third platform is what we can call a supply chain platform, the suppliers that has to go into that. So all the suppliers of materials, how transportation, logistics integrated into the product and the processes. So that's where your key partners are in that platform. And the fourth platform, which we have been spending maybe most research time in, is the competence platform. How do you actually increase the competence in the company? How do you go about such a simple thing as experience feedback? Every time I go out on some research project that I have, and I always end up at the building construction site, and I say, I would like to talk about experience feedback. No, Lars, don't go into that. We know how to do it. Then I know I'm right with my question. They don't know how to do it. So if they don't know how to do experience feedback from the processes, from the products, how they behave, And with your lifetime warranty, you have to have very good experience feedback. So that actually are 4 platforms. So prefab for me is just 1/4 of industrialization. An important part, but just 1/4 of it.
And you are totally right on the logistic. It's obvious that the logistic on an on-site construction is a huge cost. It could be 15-20% of the cost of the materials, and it's not optimized unless you set up constraint. I want just 1 truck per day. We have that in some job sites, but it's a big area for improvement, quite obvious in terms of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. You know, the crane at the building site is one of the most valuable assets on the building site. Have you asked yourself a question of who actually is in control of the crane? You'd be amazed who that person is. It's not the one that you think. It's not the production planner. It's not the plan that is in control of the crane. It's an important, blue-collar person that can order the crane to lift up things that disrupt the whole logistics of. So it's an important question. Please.
I would just like to say also that we as architects are also important in that part of building the platforms. So we will also be part of the process in the early stages. I think that's very important to understand the whole picture.
Exactly.
And today we're working a lot together with the housing companies to make their platforms, actually. And that's also another question of that is to the material waste in the industry. That's another big question, I think, to work with.
Yeah, of course, the platforms need to be circular. So you have to adopt that way of thinking, the circular economy in the platforms. So you reuse and you design for the assembly. It's a word that maybe construction can take on.
I think, Lars, you have a catalysator for this now that will make this work easier, and that's the digitalization and BIM and virtual design and construction models that you do. Because when you work in them, you are forced to take care of all it. You are forced to take care of your process. You are forced to work with your supply, the material, logistic. So in the right way, that could really be a help, I think.
Yeah, and I think going to one of your key conclusions about AI and AR, you need to invest in that. And the investment is not really the investment in the equipment, it's in the people using that equipment. So do we have another question? Yeah. Let's see. Technology often fails when human beings interfere. Yeah, that's right. How do we secure that the sociological angle in the new era of digital construction? Actually, it's a nice move to my last conclusion. How do we... There are humans in this. So the solution is not... I guess that the question is about the solution is not technical. It's about humans acting with new tools. So how do we bring in the humans in this? So we're going to be much more industrialized. We need fewer people, but more skilled people to work in this. But we still have this transition from very many people working with this that we need to bring in. The old people that have been working with this for ages are very skilled. So how can we make this transition when the human are the interface between the technologies? Anybody wanting to comment on that?
I think that is absolutely necessary. And what I've seen in some projects is that you build a perfect digital model, but you are not able to transfer it to the work site. And you don't get the information from the ones that are actually having the skills of making the montage at the work site into the model. I think it's a stepwise approach. I mean, you cannot take everything on everyone. So you have to be a bit agile here when working with the worker. We have examples of putting up some kiosks where they can see the drawings. We have examples of using iPads and so on. So I think that it's a training, it's a talking, it's an information exchange. It's very important also that the ones working in the models are coming out at site and meeting the persons that is actually making the handcraft work to see what. So It's an approach stepwise, I would say. If you bring everything on the guys that are going to make the montage.
One of the sort of interesting trends that I picked up, not by myself, but from my kids, Dad, you have to, how are you using your iPhone, Dad? Well, I use it as I use it. But the thing that I would like to say is everything is now cloud-based. It took me a while to realize what cloud-based really is. So then not as such a thing as an overarching system that you imposed. It's all these apps that comes from everybody that's so easy to grab onto. So going back to that diminishing digital phrase that you saw, Mark, would you say that it's partly because there are humans there are much more humans further down you go in the construction chain? So that might be the reason that we haven't addressed this question properly.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's why I had the slide that I had. The more labour intensive the process, and that process has to be defined, as you previously said. But at the moment, the site labour phase of that process is still very human intensive, and when you have human intensive activities, then there's a greater propensity for things to go wrong. Just as a human nature, it's just the variability of what happens. That's the real world. I mean, looking at that question, though, there's a big picture issue that sits behind this, which is the whole debate about the future of work. It's not just about construction. There is a bigger picture issue here about how humans are augmented by technology, and that's an important thing. Everyone thinks this is about humans being replaced by technology, and I think there will be some things that humans currently do that will be replaced, and there are probably things that is a good thing that are replaced, because the sort of things that are being done are quite laborious, quite boring, quite low value add. So what I think you're going to see is a world where the humans, whether it's professional services, whether it's site labour, site management, will have to refocus where they add value, because technology will be doing a lot more of the heavy lifting, or the more laborious tasks, or the more complex tasks quicker. And what it will drive, I think, in looking at my business, I run a consultancy business, I already see big challenges in terms of how I have to retrain many of my people who've been taught to do for certain things. I work in the world of cost planning, estimating, commercial management. Many of those processes that many of my people currently do will be automated, they're already being automated. So there's a much greater drive towards soft skills. So we have a term in the UK called T-shaped skills. So the vertical of the T is how deep you are in your technical background, whether you're an engineer, an architect, or whatever. And the horizontal bit of the T is your soft skills, your communication skills, your critical problem solving, your empathy. Those horizontal skills are going to become more and more important for everyone, whether you're project director, architect, installer on site. How you talk, how you interact, how you problem solve and critically analyse is going to be a much bigger issue going forward, and that's a generational shift I think you're going to see.
Yeah. And I think that this question is very important in the work that you have ahead of you. So you have started this journey, and I guess, without being certain, but I can guess when I sit up here, that most of the people in this room are from the technical side, so the hard skills. So what you need to bring in your research and development effort are the soft skills, because we're dealing with people. So that might be a sort of self-reflective question back to yourself when you're doing this work further on these 2 days.
And we moved in that regard from a very product R&D oriented approach towards more customer experience. If we put ourselves in the shoes of a customer, what does that mean? How do we make their life easier? And I'm quite optimistic also on the digital. It's not only a question of generation, it's up to us to make it easier, approachable for the people who live on the job site. And when the tool is right, when it's easy to use, when you have delivered the proper training, and we do a lot of hours of training in our distribution outlets, in our manufacturing businesses, then I would say you embark a lot more people into that. So it's not only a question of generation, it's to make it easy to put ourselves in the shoes of the guy on the crane, the value of his job, how is the center of and make it positive, attractive, and easier. So yes, we have to reflect more on on the end customer and partner with the customers, all the value chain, rather than just on the product.
Yeah. So I think that we are going to just conclude this question, but I think that you can turn your eyes on how your architects did. You passed through this 20 years ago, didn't you? when you started out with the pencil and now everything is 3D. Everything, as you said, everything is 3D. So it's in the engineering, design, and architecture that everything is 3D, 4D, even 5D nowadays. So you have an experience as a group of going through this transition from analog to digital. I guess that have been, over those 20 years, you have faced some problems that you maybe can share with everybody else.
Yes, but I think also as an architect, we are trained to see to visualize the picture of the product or the home or the public place or what we are creating. So I think it's the digital tools is a tool for us just to come forward.
So I urge you guys to talk to architects, not about their artistic competence, but how they manage this digital translation that I've been going through for 20 years. So talk to them. So do we have another question? Isn't sustainability, people, planet, prosperity the most important driver? Jonas.
Yes.
You got that question.
Yeah, I think it's a very important driver. We have to solve these problems for the planet and everything like that, and live in a very good environment in our daily lives. So, of course, it must be a driver, and we have seen a very big change in the building sector the latest 10 years, and we have working with architects and construction companies like you, and there is a will now in this sector actually to build a sustainable areas or cities, as I see it. And I think this off-site construction or prefab or whatever you call it really could contribute to that after what I heard here today. So yes.
So of course, it's a rather stupid question, isn't it? Of course, the answer is yes to that. Who can say no to this question? So it's no such thing as stupid questions. I know that, but this is a very important question. I would like to say that of course we need to address this issue about circularity, about sustainability, about the people in the processes, about the technology. So it's a really difficult task. The question is rather good in that sense, of course it is. As a concluder of this session, we need to incorporate people, and people needs to be enthusiastic and made. You want to be happy when you go to work, right? You want to be proud of your work. So people is important. The planet, of course, is important because that's all about the sustainability in the most sense. The planet, we need to preserve the planet. So prosperity, it could be something that you count on as performance of a company. That is, of course, also an important issue. But please bear with you this question into the work that you have, that the people and sustainability issue is absolutely necessary when you go off-site. You have the possibility to do something new, but you still have the rucksack of the old with you. So you have to be in the both systems at the same time. So I would like to thank the panel, and I would especially like to thank Mark for you introducing this to the panel. So maybe my two personal reflections on this is, besides this, is that it's a tricky journey. The companies that I have been studying and working with for 20 years, they have been devoting themselves into this. Some of you met Lindbäcks yesterday. I guess that there are about 40 persons meeting Lindbäck. I remember Stefan Lindbäck. He was an old student of mine. So I remembered him as small. I still have, he's one of my best friends. And one thing that I would characterize him is he's devoted. He was a diver before. He was devoted diver. So he's a devoted person. I think that is important. It is a difficult transition to a new thing that you're going through, but you have to be devoted. And now I have these guys up here that are really the bosses for all this. So you guys have to be very supportive. That is the key thing for the success of Limbex, because they are supportive, and it doesn't take one day. It don't take a year. It might take like 10 years. So this is my key message, to go on to this, and you will not find it immediately as return on capital. You will see it eventually as a change. So that is one question. And the other reflections that I have that actually you brought up, thank you for that, is don't lose sight of, don't just think of new build. Think of also renovation. That is a much more difficult technological solution. It also includes the humans in it in a very special sense, the social structures when you're remodeling your home. So think of that, how can that, so don't lose track of that. So devotion and renovation, that might be my conclusion. So now I think that the coffee is waiting, and thank you for today.